We get to see your dancing skills, Adam. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you with us today. I'm Camille Fetter, and I'm the founder and CEO of Talentfoot Executive Search. For those unfamiliar with us, we specialize in placing transformational leaders primarily at the director level and above across sales, marketing, technology, operations, finance, and HR. Before launching my career in executive search, I worked at a crisis line, and it was an experience that shaped my belief in the critical role that mental health plays in not only creating a fulfilling life, but also creating a fulfilling career. And oftentimes those two, at least for me, go hand in hand. A fulfilling career absolutely can lead to a more fulfilling life. After 20 years in executive search, I've seen firsthand how mental health can make or break high-performing teams. You've probably heard the saying before, and my team hears this from me all the time: happy employees make happy customers. Today, we're going to explore why mental health isn't just the right thing to do, it's becoming a true business advantage. So today, I'd love to kick us off by giving our guest speaker a better sense of who's in the audience. If you can all get your chat feature ready for use, I'd love for you to drop in 4 things. 1, your position title. 2, your industry. 3, your location. And 4, one word, how you would describe your company's approach to mental health today. This is also an opportunity for us to give the audience members an opportunity to understand who's in the room. I'm a true believer throughout our webinars, we not only have an incredible opportunity to learn from our guest speakers, but an incredible opportunity to learn from the great minds in the room. So throughout our time, please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A tool specifically, if you can. We're going to have a Q&A portion at the end of our time together, and we'll be looking at those questions that you've dropped in throughout our session to make sure that we get as many of your questions answered as possible. Others can learn from the questions that you're asking. And then also, please feel free to share any insights, thoughts, experiences that you've had as a leader in your organizations throughout your time, and allow others to learn from your experiences. Please don't be shy. All right, thank you for sharing. Looks like we've got folks coming from all over the US, folks from different industries. This is exciting. All right. Now, on to our guest speaker. We are thrilled to be joined today by Adam Nemer, founder of Simple Mental Health and former CFO and senior operations executive at Kaiser Permanente. Adam is helping to redefine how leaders think and talk about mental health, bridging the human side of this conversation with the business case behind it. Today, he's going to share his personal story with the utmost level of vulnerability, walk us through the core principles of mental health literacy, and help you understand how to create a stigma-free culture and fuel performance and retention. Without further ado, Adam, kick us off.
Thanks so much, Camille, and to all of you. It really is an honor to be able to spend some time with you all today. You know, my goal over the next hour is to educate you on the business case and hopefully inspire you on the human case to adopt mental health literacy as part of the foundation of your leadership approach going forward, and to normalize the topic of mental health on your teams. And I'm going to leave you with some simple next steps that you can deploy that will launch you on your journey when you log off this call. And I want to start by bringing you back about 20 years ago to one of the absolute best days of my career. I was walking down the hallways of Sunnyside Hospital just outside of Portland, Oregon, and the thought crossed my mind, man, you're the CFO of this place today. It was a job I surely wasn't ready for, but it was a job I talked the company into giving me. And the only reason I didn't throw my hands in the air and celebrate having the greatest job in the world is I was friggin' miserable. Man, I couldn't breathe. I had a clutching pain in my chest that wanted to explode. I had anger I couldn't put my fingers on. I had a 18-year anxiety attack layered on top of severe depression. And, you know, I I had no clue. I just thought that how I felt was what life was supposed to feel like. You know, Walking down the hallway that morning, I thought I was going further and further into my dream career, but I was just walking deeper and deeper into a really dark and lonely place. It impacted my ability to lead, my ability to be led, to be a husband, a father, a friend. It impacted my ability to be the person I wanted to be. By all outward appearances, I lived this charmed life, but on the inside, I was always so sad and so scared. And I couldn't control my emotions, and I had absolutely no idea why. Then about, geez, now it's almost 8 years ago now, something really special happened, something that shifted my life in the most profound way. A colleague at work, a senior executive at Kaiser Permanente, this guy named David Lake, he asked me to join him in his office one morning. And when I got there, he asked me how I was feeling, right? Uh, I had recently found my mom after she had passed away, and having learned the signs of someone who might be struggling with their mental health, David recognized a bunch of behaviors in me that really concerned him, and he wanted to help. So he asked if I was doing okay, if I was seeing a therapist, and completely oblivious to the reality that at that moment in time I was slipping closer and closer into a state of near complete emotional collapse. I smiled and told him, "Nah, man, I don't need any help. I'm doing great." So he asked if I knew what to look for in myself, right? The signs that I might be struggling with my mental well-being. And after I said no, he pulled out of his coat pocket and then slid across the desk the business card of Kaiser's Employee Assistance Program in the Northwest. And he's like, give EAP a call. It can't hurt. You should at least know the signs to look for in yourself in case you need to get some help down the road, right? That 5-minute conversation changed my life. It set me out on a journey that's made my life since then so much more full of love and joy and happiness. And I realized that I wasn't on the path alone. That path that David sent me down, by calling the EAP hotline, by going to therapy, by talking about my feelings with the people in my life, I found that I had a ton of folk around me just wanting to help and be there for me. And then I also learned that just by being open about my mental health with my colleagues at work, and by genuinely caring about all of their emotional needs and mental well-being too, that not only my life and the lives of my teammates changed, but our business performance changed, right? A high-performing team started hitting heights I never would have thought possible. And what I hope you hear and take away from the session today, why I share all of this with you, it's that it's time that we all break through the traditional stigmas of mental illness that's informed traditional leadership practices. It's time for all of us to put mental health literacy in our professional toolboxes. Basic mental health literacy, just learning how to recognize the signs that someone might be struggling with their mental well-being, how to engage them in a safe, thoughtful, caring, and non-judgmental manner, how to guide them to services so that they can get help. Knowing how to normalize the conversation of mental health on your teams. These skills are just as important for a business leader as knowing the levers to pull to increase revenue, or develop an annual budget, or lead an effective board of directors meeting. Here's just one data point, and Camille, we'll go over a lot more later in the Q&A, but just look at this. Depression alone. Studies show that depression alone can cause an average productivity dip of 35% in an individual, right? That's almost 2 lost days of productivity each week when an employee experiences depression, right? And we got a ton of folk experiencing depression. On that, here's the official prevalence stat from the CDC. Every year, more than 1 out of 5 Americans experience what a behavioral health clinician would diagnose in a medical record as a mental illness, right? But less than half of us get help, and that the median time period from the onset of symptoms to getting help is nearly 11 years. Okay? Can you imagine experiencing the signs and symptoms of breast cancer, or colon cancer for 11 years, but waiting 11 years to go see the doctor? So mental illness, it's real. It's all around us. It can be paralyzing. It can hurt like hell. And it's this hidden productivity drain on all of our teams. But, I swear, as a recovering CFO, all I see are dollar signs here, because the cool thing is that mental health, the great news is that it's also addressable, right? Far more often than not, conventional therapies work. Antidepressants, cognitive therapy, self-care, we can get better, right? Recovery from a mental health condition is possible, it's probable, and it's even expected, especially with early intervention. And, you got to wonder, you ever wonder what the heck's going on here? How could it possibly be that nearly 20% of Americans every year experience a clinically diagnosable yet curable illness, but less than half of us get help? And those that do, we wait 11 years, right? How could it be? It turns out that the answer is one of those, what do they call it? A blinding flash of the obvious, right? So stigma. It's stigma. Evidence-based studies published in peer-reviewed journals show that 80% of people who don't get help for a mental health illness say it's stigma that's the reason they don't get help. That's it. We're just worried about what everyone else will think. And can you imagine if 20% of us got cancer each year, but less than half of us got help just because we were worried about what other people would think? It's insidious. It's this isolation cycle around mental illness in our society, how the myths we've taught ourselves, like depression isn't real, drives the stigmas, like, people with depression are just weak, and those stigmas drive feelings of shame, like, oh my God, I feel depressed, I must be a weak person. And so we stay silent, right? Oh my God, I don't want to tell anybody about this. It's this self-perpetuating cycle that's literally ripping us apart from each other. But what's cool is in here, it's also the solution, because as we start sharing our stories with each other and as we educate ourselves, the myths get debunked, the stigmas and the shame start to fade away, and the silence ends because more of us start sharing our stories. So in that spirit, I want to go back for a few minutes to that 5-minute conversation in David's office now almost 8 years ago. As I walked in, I had no idea the severity of the mental illness I'd been experiencing for almost 18 years, which, let alone that I had mental illness to begin with, which is ironic given where my story begins. Earlier in life, when I was 29 and getting groomed to run my family business, I found my dad after he died of suicide. And I didn't get anywhere near enough help that I needed, right? My best friend, my business partner, the guy I always wanted to be just like, he hadn't shown up for work one day, which was really weird because he was always the first one there in the office. So I drove down to check on him at home. And when I got there, I found him in the kitchen. He had shot himself, and what happened next in the coming days and weeks and months after I found him at this crossroads in my life where I needed it the most and it would have prevented so much pain down the road. And I only had a few therapy sessions and I went off into the world, just running as fast as I possibly could, just running so that this shadow of all these memories wouldn't catch up and envelop me, right? I got married, I got MBA, I should say. I got married. I grew a successful executive career, the CFO of a hospital, CFO of a multi-billion-dollar healthcare system. And I ended up as a senior executive accountable for the operations of a $4.5 billion health plan. But at times, without knowing it, I I could be a monster to everyone around me, my colleagues at work, my friends, my kids, my now ex-wife. I raised my voice. I interrupted people when they spoke. I could be relentless, arrogant, short-tempered, defensive, impatient, dismissive. I could be a real son of a bitch to absolutely everybody. But you know, what I really was, I was just the son of a guy who had taken his life, right? The son who lost his icon. I was the son who didn't know where to go to deal with his pain, so I pushed it down. And I had no idea that I was using all my strength and resilience just to keep it bottled up and hidden from everyone around me, even from myself. But David Lake, that leader who had mental health literacy, check this out, a leader who had just recently taken a mental health first aid class at his church, saw the signs that I was struggling and he knew what to do to help, right? So after that conversation, a few days later, I saw the EAP counselor and the real hard work of healing began. I started taking antidepressants, going to cognitive therapy. I went through a specialized trauma recovery program. And, today, 8 years later, even though I still have good and bad days, eventually over time, I came out the other end. I came out stronger than I ever dreamt I could be with, for the very first time in my life, true self-love, self-respect, and self-confidence. And while I was on the journey of recovery and got educated on the facts, I started to think about leadership differently, right? At the time there were, I don't know, 400 or 500 people on my small little part of Kaiser Permanente on my teams, which, that meant that I was going to have 80 to 100 people of my friends and colleagues going to be struggling in silence, just like I was, right? 180 to 100 people on my watch. And I'm thinking, if I knew I was going to have almost 100 people on my teams experience cancer next year, I'd do something about it. Solving that would be my number one business priority. So what we ended up doing is, over the course of a couple weeks, we trained all of our staff and leaders on mental health literacy, right? Executives, supervisors, staff, all together in the same rooms, learning to have those 5-minute conversations like David had with me. And what I wasn't expecting, and what still boggles my mind to this day, was that as we trained everybody, right? And as I shared my journey, and then everybody started talking about theirs and sharing theirs, our business performance improved across the board. Employee engagement, productivity, retention, recruiting, almost every key performance indicator on our teams improved. And within 2 years, our health plan operations team of the Northwest began to lead all other Kaiser regions on almost every single KPI that we measured. It was amazing. All I wanted to do was help people feel better. But what we ended up doing was unleashing all of that hidden productivity. And we ended up becoming a top performing operations team in our company. Reflecting on the experience over 20 years as a leader and executive at a $90 billion company, becoming mental health literate was the single best team development and performance improvement activity I ever participated in. And it was a few months after I came back to work following my emotional collapse now about 8 years ago, I had this all hands meeting with our staff where I shared with them the story about what was going on in my life. And, they were all wondering, like, where's Nemer been? They were used to seeing me and I hadn't been there for a while and they had no idea why. And, so I just shared with them what was going on in my life. And, a few days later, I went for a walk with this young guy on our team. His name is Cameron, a great, young, earnest leader we'd recruited from Colorado. And, as we were walking, he started thanking me. He told me that as a young kid, he had attempted suicide and he had tried therapy after that, but it didn't seem to work. He knew that he didn't want to die, but he just always thought his life was going to be sad. And then when he heard me, his boss's boss, his senior leader, share that I was going through similar struggles and was in therapy, and even though it wasn't working yet, I was in it for the long haul because I was confident that it would. He was just thanking me because it inspired him to want to try therapy again, and he'd made a therapy appointment for the next week. you know, we've stayed in touch over the years. And oh boy, I had a chance to speak with Cameron just this past fall. And I am here to report that he's thriving. 8 years later, he's thriving. He's happy. He's has a community of friends around him supporting him. He's optimistic about life, and he's now a leader of teams in 3 states. And like me, and like David Lake, and I know like Camille, he'll tell you that if you want to take care of your organizations, you absolutely have to take care of your people. And if you want to take care of your career, you absolutely got to take care of yourself. And there's just no better way to accomplish both of those things than just by learning these mental health literacy skills that we're talking about today, and to start normalizing the conversation of mental health on your teams and organizations by just sharing the knowledge and spreading the knowledge. So look, thank you so much. I know I look forward to working with you all over the next hour and hearing all the and answering and talking with you all and seeing what questions you might have.
Thank you, Adam. You're incredible. Thank you for being so vulnerable with your story. And I'm beyond moved, and I'm sure everyone in the audience is as well. So you talk a lot about obviously mental health literacy, it being mission critical, right? So obviously you did a phenomenal job of rolling out a mental health literacy program, right? Training all of your leaders on mental health literacy so they could help identify it among their teams. But I'm sure naturally they started to identify it within themselves, right? So it sounds like it was very much skewed towards leadership training, right? But you were killing 2 birds with 1 stone, if you will, right?
Training for everybody.
Yeah.
We all have CPR. I think our stat is like more than 70% of Americans have been trained in CPR. When someone's walking, you're walking down the hallway at work and someone's having is having looking like signs they're having a heart attack. We don't say, hey, call a leader so they can call 911. These are
Mhm.
skills that we all need to have. And what our focus is if it starts with the leaders, if the leaders get them, and they start exhibiting those behaviors, they'll change their culture. Then everyone else will start using it.
Absolutely. So what else are world-class companies doing approaching mental health as a driver of ROI, in addition to training and teaching mental health literacy? What are some other approaches organizations are doing today that you see are making an impact?
You bet. If there's an organization out there called One Mind at Work that just does, and we'll send you website information to everyone who's on here. They do remarkable work helping businesses address mental health in the workplace. And one of the things that they talk about, and I love it when they say it's like, well, the first thing they ask is, do you have a strategy for mental health? Right? So world-class companies in this zone number 1, they have a strategy, right? An example of that is the Mars Corporation. Mars Corporation. So One Mind at Work, what they've done is they've created this index that it's a handful of questions that executives at an organization can answer that gives you a sense for the overall mental health of your organization. And Mars uses that One Mind at Work index as part of information for them as they roll out plans and throughout their organization. It's one example. You have that strategy and leveraging it. Next thing, world-class leaders, they're normalizing the topic in their communities, right? So, this is going to blow your mind, I bet, but you probably don't know. The construction industry, construction workers have the second highest suicide rate of any industry in America, right? And so one of the big challenges there is breaking the stigma. So Hoffman Construction, one of the largest general contractors on the West Coast, they have a program called their GUTS program, the Get Us There Safely program. And we'll send you information about that. What they've done is they've put, they use a lot of on-site peer support where folks who may be struggling, construction workers, can talk with a colleague on site who can talk with them. It's an amazing program that they're running at Hoffman. Another example of a world-class thing, something else that world-class leaders do is they integrate mental well-being into our workplace safety initiatives, right? So, across America, we have done an amazing job at improving workplace safety through the physical safety perspective. Now, America's largest steel company, Nucor Steel, right out of North Carolina, Nucor Steel has said safety of their employees is number one on their priorities. They said, we're going to incorporate mental health into how we think about workplace safety. Now, a handful of years later, across all their mills, they have 87 employees have been trained to be mental health first aid trainers in their organization, right? And 1,600 employees at Nucor Steel have been trained, and they're integrating it now rolling it out through their workplace safety program, right? So we're expanding their knowledge and what they're thinking about workplace safety. Last thing, and this is kind of, there are other things, but I know in the interest of time, you probably have more questions. Cutting edge stuff, AT&T, Google, Comcast, Delta, you can read about them doing pilots there where they're putting therapists in the office space, right? It makes all the sense in the world, right? And you think about the productivity drop just alone, and there's other stats that we can go over. The ROI on actually having an on-site HIPAA compliant therapist program, it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing those additional items. Audience, we have a question for you. On a scale from 1 to 10, how well does your leadership team understand the business impact of mental health? 1, not at all. 10, they deeply understand it and take it meaningful, consistent action to support mental health in the workplace.
-1 million.
It's nice to see some 10s. Great. Wonderful. And I'm sure many of you are here because this obviously is a topic of interest, and that I'd imagine there's many in the audience who are driving a lot of these initiatives and only looking to improve. This is very helpful. All right, Adam, what's the cost of ignoring mental health well-being in the workplace, and how does it quietly erode performance and retention? I'm sure you have lots of statistics as a former CFO on this.
It's funny how you frame it. It's what's the cost of ignoring it? It's exactly that. It's the opportunity cost, right? So, and I think I shared this earlier. I just see dollars all over this, from efficiency perspective, because what we have is this hidden productivity drain in all of our organizations. Unless you've already addressed this and your folks have a high mental well-being, and if you're just an average organization, right, we're struggling significantly here. And so let's do some numbers. So if you lose it with depression, we know that you lose 35% of your productivity, right? Oxford University MBA program 2 years ago found that people who are happy improve their productivity over average by 13%, right?
Wow.
So when you help somebody move from really unhappy to really happy, there are studies that show, and what our examples on our teams show is that's all we did is we just helped people get happy, and it unleashed all of that performance. So the cost is you're missing all this stuff. It's like we're like you're going forward in your speedboat, but you got wind taking you the other. I mean, it's just crazy. It's stuck in there. Here's some other data points that we're missing that make this opportunity cost even bigger. Absenteeism, right? It's the score, when people don't show up for work, right, at the last minute. Gallup Group a couple years ago, and we'll send you all these studies. A couple years ago, the Gallup Group found that people who struggle with their mental well-being miss more than 450%, 50% unplanned work days each year, right? From a retention perspective, Mindshare Partners found that more than 50% of millennials and 75% of Gen Zers have left a job in part due to mental health reasons. The APA, the American Psychological Association, a few years ago found that 81% of Americans, all Americans, report that how a future employer will support their mental well-being will be a significant factor for them in choosing their next job, right? So it's the opportunity cost here is what's massive. And what's really cool is that it's there, right? What organization isn't worried about productivity, attention, recruiting, absenteeism and overall team dynamic and performance? It's one of those things that when we address this and help destigmatize and normalize the conversation, become mental health literate, it literally lifts all of our performance boats.
So Neil asked a great question. You touched on some of the calculations, or at least variables of the calculation: missed work days, right? Attrition. Do you have a mental health calculator, or any general calculations or aspects of the formula? No, because we have attrition calculators, right, in executive search, but I was curious, do you have any general ways that you'd say, here's the way to measure performance either lacking or the impact of ignoring mental health?
I don't, and you see me laughing only because I was on the phone the other day with a friend, and actually in your neck of the woods up in Chicago, Joel Feldman. He's working on putting a model together like that that's just easy for people to use. But as long as I have him on mine, he runs this website. It's called covermymentalhealth.org, right? So it's like a lot of people, they struggle with their insurance companies might not cover something, or they might not get denied. Well, that happens. You go to covermymentalhealth.org and they walk you through the processes to appeal that decision and what you do in that situation. So that kind of really gets to what, it's an example of services that are out there that leaders can share with their teams.
Great. Have you heard of any organizations weaving in questions along the lines of mental health and exit interviews to try to pinpoint if there's a higher level of attrition related to mental health?
I don't know anything. I don't know that very specifically. I would be shocked if there aren't.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So question for the audience. I believe leadership is a natural skill among many, but I also believe it's a learned skill for many as well. If you had to teach one skill to your managers to better support employee mental health, what would it be? Again, if you had to teach one skill to managers or to better support employee mental health, also known as improving mental health literacy, what would it be? Empathy, listening, mental health first aid training, love it. Listening, modeling vulnerability. I think that's beyond important. Recognize the signs. Excellent. All right, Adam, what are the core components of mental health literacy that every results-driven leader needs to know?
really just three basic things. Keep it really simple. The basic facts, the human case, the business case, those basic facts that we've already talked about, that it's real, it's everywhere, that it's impacting our organizations. Understand second, the core elements of mental health first aid, right? I mean, we all know if there was someone choking at a board meeting, we'd all know how to save their life, right? But we don't know how to help people, that same person having an anxiety attack at that same leadership meeting. And those stats that we talked about, 1 out of 5 Americans, that's leadership too, right? And so learning the core elements of mental health first aid, which is simply knowing the signs the signs and symptoms to recognize that someone might be struggling. Number one. Number two, how to approach them in a safe, thoughtful, caring, non-judgmental manner, and how to guide them to services in the community, right? And then the third piece of mental health literacy for leaders is being committed to normalizing the topic of mental health in your organization. So talking about it, there's one of the few things that leaders cannot delegate is culture, right? And leaders can create a culture where mental health is as common and okay topic to talk about as physical health. And that's by normalizing the conversation. So those are really the three key elements: just understanding the basic facts of why it's important, knowing how to help people in the moment, and knowing how to normalize that topic so that people just feel comfortable to go seek out help. Can I add one other thought for you, Camille?
Please.
You mentioned something earlier that got me thinking about the mental health first aid training and other programs like that. Is that what's really neat is that it's also something that really helps a lot of people kind of self-identify for themselves, right? So one of the when you bring this to your company, you have folks go, oh wow, I kind of see myself in there. I should go get help. It's a wonderful gift. In fact, there was a study that was done about a decade ago. They gave mental health first aid training to residents, assistants, RAs at half of some dorms at a college, and they didn't give the mental health first aid training to the other half of the resident assistants. And then they wanted to measure, would the students in the dorms with the RAs who were trained have a higher prevalence of seeking out help from the on-campus mental health provider? Turns out it didn't. There was no statistical difference. However, the RAs that went to the mental health first aid program had a statistically higher significant utilization of the mental health services on campus than the RAs that didn't go through it. So it's really it's a neat aspect of the training that you give people.
Fantastic. That's great. All right, Adam, we are nearing the end, so we only have 2 more questions left for you. Audience, again, just a reminder, drop any questions you have for our Q&A portion at the end in the Q&A, and we will make sure we get to as many of your questions as possible, which we're approaching soon. Adam, how can leaders build a compelling business case for investing in mental health and get buy-in from the C-suite and board that it's a strategic priority?
Well, putting the business case together is one thing, right? And then it's engaging your leadership, and there's textbook stuff, right? There's textbooks part of this answer, provide a solution to a problem that they don't know how to fix. I mean, here's the thing is, executives across America now, especially post-COVID, we all know that there's a mental health crisis in America. We're investing more dollars in mental wellness programs than ever before, but the situation's getting worse. And so it's providing for our leaders in a simple, eloquent business case manner, the way you would normally get anything else done in your company. If you're a hospital and you need a new MRI, there's a way of getting C-suite buy-in for the MRI. If you're running a steel company, you need a new mill, there's a process for whatever that process is for other things in your company, throw this into that mix and drive it and get it done as a leader. That's how you do it. And then at the end, it really is, this is a conversation about culture. And it's really important that when we talk with our our leaders that we give all the business case, the preponderance of the evidence that shows this is the right thing to do from a business perspective. But then, it gets to that, we don't want to leave out that notion that, when we start our businesses, we go vision, mission, core values, right? And core values are what we want our culture to be. And it's the thing that leaders can't delegate. And so it's pointing that out, that all we're asking for them to do is not to eliminate the entire core values and culture of the company, but just adding one to them. This concept that mental health is an okay thing to talk about and get help for.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, audience. In the past 12 months, has your organization taken intentional steps to shift its culture around mental health, or has it been business as usual? Drop a yes in the chat if your organization has been actively addressing mental health, and drop a no in the chat if it's been business as usual. Big fat no. Looks like a 50-50 split so far. Thank you, audience members. Okay, Adam. What are the more frequently asked questions you get from leaders across the country? I'm sure you hear it all.
There's the most common stuff are usually the natural things that are kind of like historical blockers that people would say, like, well, the legal department won't let me talk about someone's mental health, or HIPAA won't allow me to do it, or HR won't let me do it. And when in fact, you can ask somebody about their mental health just as you can ask somebody about their physical health, right? You can't discriminate people based on it. And so there's a lot of conversation of that, and it's okay, and we should be asking those questions, but those are some early obstacles. Another question that's I get asked a lot, and we get asked a lot, is, so someone, we notice that someone's getting help and they're in the process of getting help. How can I support them? How can I help them? Right? And what we talk about is, well, the same way you support people if they have a physical illness, right? Someone could have cancer. They could have a different stage of cancer. They could have stage 4 cancer and they're out of work for a few months. They could have stage 1 cancer and they miss a little bit of work now and then, but you still talk to them. You ask them how they're doing, how they're feeling. If they want to keep the information private, etc., you can still check on people. And so the thing that is really important just to remember is, conversations are important, that they're confidential, but we need to keep following up with people and seeing how they're doing. Just like, if someone has told you, they walked in, they told you that they just got diagnosed with early stage breast cancer, we wouldn't say, oh, okay, and never bring it up. We'd check in on them.
Right. Thank you for that. Okay, if our audience could walk away with just one tip or one takeaway from everything discussed and shared today, what might that be? Or you could see it as, Adam, if you were in an elevator and you had 45 seconds and a leader said to you, how can I become a better, more literate mental health leader, or how can I impact mental health for my workplace today? And you had only one tip or takeaway for them to consider or keep in mind, what might that be?
When you normalize the topic of mental health and share your stories, performance gets unleashed and lives transformed, usually including your own.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Are you ready for our Q&A? I actually have a burning question, and it's on the heels of what you just shared. So if the audience is anything like me, I'm constantly thinking through, okay, theory concepts, but how do I put it into action, right? So if I'm walking away from our time together today, deciding I want to be a leader who models being in touch with my mental health and normalizing mental health, what are some ways I can model that with my teams and in my leadership style today?
What can you do right away immediately? First, sharing asking people how they feel. You know, when you're starting conversations with people, starting with, "Hey, how you doing today? How are things going?" Ask about their lives, making sure having a conversation with people. And then and the real gift there is on the return, share how you're doing honestly. You know, it's oftentimes, people say oftentimes that it's leadership is a lonely profession. It's lonely at the top. That's because we think that we're not supposed to share how we're feeling with people, right? There's this notion that we're supposed to leave our emotions at the door and not talk about feelings at work. And so, you know, when a leader says to somebody, when they say, "Well, how are you doing today?" When that leader says, it's honestly, it's kind of a tough morning. I just got noticed that I have a new target for one of our areas, and I really haven't the foggiest idea how we're going to get it done, but I know we'll figure it out. But I'm kind of hyperventilating. I'm a little stressed out this morning. I'm not really sure, right? That's one of the biggest gifts that you can give in modeling this behavior, because you model the behavior by actually modeling the behavior and sharing how you're feeling. That's just one example that people can do. A second one that I love, take people out for walking one-on-ones. Whenever you have meetings with people, go for a walk with them. And if it's in a virtual area, you can still go for a walk with somebody. You can walk while you're listening to each other. There's a gazillion things that you can do that will create this sense of psychological safety amongst your teams. We all have EAP, employee assistance programs. Most of us do. A wonderful thing that a leader can do to spark this culture is actually use EAP yourself. If your company offers an employee assistance program, it's a beautiful program. Call it, check it out, work on something in your life. And then the next time at a leadership team meeting, share, "Hey, I I utilized the AP last week. They helped me work through a challenge I was having as my mom was passing. What a cool thing. Did you all know that we had this as a benefit?" It's
Yes,
behaviors like that. It's
share and
modeling
share.
this behavior.
Hmm. Yep, I love it. That's fantastic. And I think so many leaders today and for centuries have felt like they have to put on a brave face at all times and frankly not be human. And what does that do? It tells your workforce not to be human, right? Nothing's more stifling.
I have been to so many emergency meetings that go like this. There's this crisis that hit, an IT crisis, this big project that has to hit, and I'm one of 50 people in a room looking at a leader up there saying, "This is really hard, but we can do it. And I know we got it." And everyone there is going, "Oh, what the hell are they thinking? Oh my God." But we've all then go to our teams and say, "I got this. We got this. We got this." And everyone on our teams are going, "Well, that's kind of BS. And so it just rolls downhill. And when we're honest and share how we're doing it literally, it doesn't bring everybody down. It lifts all of their boats because it brings more authenticity into the question and brings more credibility to your leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. More questions from the audience. In your opinion, more about measurement, Adam. In your opinion and in your experiences, what's the biggest thing CFOs need to hear when it comes to getting agreement on investing in a mental health program at the organization?
I'm going to dichotomize. Well, actually, I don't need to. I think the biggest thing that CFOs need to hear is about productivity. It's just, we all struggle with retention, recruiting, and absenteeism and all of that. But the fact of the matter is that productivity in the workplace, when you start doing the math, that 20% plus minus of our teams are working at 3/5 of their total potential, that's the number. And that's the conversation to be having. And that's, if you're going to show them, that's where you pilot it, measure it, and show it. And that's what, and I don't, Camille, I'm not a rocket scientist. I didn't do this on purpose. This just happened for us on accident on our teams. We trained everybody on mental health first aid. And then just as over the next couple years, people just got healthier. And as people got healthier, our attendance improved, our retention improved. We didn't have to recruit as much because people didn't leave as much. Our team dynamic got better. We literally, with hindsight, you can go back and see how we literally were reaping the reward of, we talked about that opportunity cost of all of that productivity. We just reaped that opportunity cost. And that's what a CFO wants to hear.
So really starting with, and frankly, I mean, any sophisticated organization measures productivity already, right? So being able to say, look, we're going to invest, we're going to do a pilot. Maybe it's by function. Maybe you start with one function, right? Where you've got a lot of hand raisers and you've got the right leaders that are in touch with their mental health, to invest in that function and measure productivity. What would be that timeline? Would you say, okay, you've rolled out the program, you've done the proper training, so you've measured productivity before the program. How long after the program would you say is an easy, persuasive comparable? 6 months after?
12 to 24 months.
Okay.
Yeah, because really what we're doing here is, it's not like snap your fingers and
Right.
it happens the next day. What
Right.
happens is we train each other on mental health first aid. We talk about it. Then people on our teams who need help start selecting, oh, you know what? I'm experiencing those things that my leader was just telling me about. And he said it's okay, or she said it was okay that I get help. So I go get help. That's kind of does that make sense? I see.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Adam, how is polyvagal theory integrating into the mental health literacy today?
I'm a recovering CFO. I'm not a clinician. I can't go. I don't think I spelled right what you just asked me. Paper. I have the foggiest idea. I got poly right. I know I'm pretty sure I spelled poly right, but I have the foggiest idea.
No worries, no worries. What are some easy recognizable signs, triggers, if you will, for a leader to be hyper aware of when looking to identify mental health issues?
Yeah, well, so this is the cool thing. Mental health first aid, this sort of stuff, we're naturally wired for it, right? As human beings, we know it. And when you go through this training, you go through, oh, those are blinding flashes of the obvious. And I'll give you an example. And so at the risk of actually messing with the chat, do me a favor. If you're on the call, if you're listening to this webinar right now, think about what are some common signs and symptoms that you've seen people at work or at home that you think might be signs of someone struggling with their mental well-being. Just kind of type it in the chat. Apathy, disengagement. What else? Aggression, brain fog. Yeah. Not having lunch with colleagues, defensive, short fuse, low energy, long face. We know this stuff, right? We're looking for changes in behavior. Someone who normally is really participatory is leaning back, and someone who normally just listens is really participatory. Me, I started wearing Levi's t-shirts and flip-flops, and I'm running an insurance company. I was mean as hell to everybody. It looked like I was going to the beach, right? Changes in appearance, irritation, sadness, all of these. How about this? You know that they've been drinking too much because they kind of smell like alcohol in the morning. I mean, we know these things. And what's so cool about these training is that when we get them, it's so darn easy because it's like, oh yeah, I know that. I was just not connecting in my head the dot between those signs and someone could be struggling with their mental health. Now, by the way, when you go to the training, it doesn't mean that they are. There could be lots of other reasons. Maybe they just didn't sleep well. Maybe their mom's not doing well. Maybe their dog died. Maybe their back is bothering them. So you're not diagnosing somebody. You're just noticing that somebody might be struggling.
Yep. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's sometimes you just need to have the conversation to remind yourself of the obvious, right? So thank
You
you
know
for that.
what? It's why the organization is called Simple Mental Health, right? You know, getting getting better is a lot of hard work, right?
Yep. Yep.
Helping people get into traction to get help can be really simple. It's just using what we see in front of us.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. All right. We have time for one more, maybe a 1-minute answer for one more Q&A question, and then we're going to wrap it up. Adam, what are your thoughts about offering a grief mental health protected leave of absence for an employee who experienced a horrific traumatic grief due to a death or a near-death occurrence within their family?
Say the phrase again, a grief.
A grief mental health protected leave of absence.
So it's tough because I balance both a corporate executive view and then mental well-being view, right? And what's the right thing from both of those perspectives? And my answer is really, are you lacking something in your existing policies and benefits that doesn't fit under? Then heck yeah. But if you already have strong, grief mental health protection, there's lots of mental health, we have grievance leave, there's so much leave that we have. My answer would be, and I would really look at, does it already fit under something already? And if not, then it could be something really important to add. But here's something more, here's something else off the top of my head, is that if you look at, grief mental health protective leave, right? If it doesn't naturally fall under something, aren't you kind of missing something naturally? You could have what it could be is you're missing something bigger, not just this narrow thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. And a huge thank you to you, Adam, for sharing both your story and your insights on this incredibly important topic to all of us who are here and attended today. I know, without a doubt, your work is fueling healthier places of work. But I also have no doubt that you're truly saving lives in the work that you do. And thank you to our audience for being with us. I hope this time together sparked some fresh thinking around how mental health can drive real business results and how each of us as leaders can step up and play an even more significant role in building healthier, higher performing teams. We will be sending an email with the key takeaways, one-sheeter, and we will also be sending the recording. Feel free to share as you wish. And if you'd like to keep learning from Adam, please follow him on LinkedIn for more insights and resources around mental health literacy and leadership. And before you go, we're going to drop in a link to take a 1-minute survey. Feedback is a gift to us. It's completely anonymous, and your input really helps us shape future events to be as valuable as possible. Thanks again for being here, everyone. And thank you for being the kind leader who leans into conversations that truly matter. Thank you all. And thank you, Adam.
You will. Thank you.